diverse in terms of what you find in different cultures. So different cultures have different words for demons, but most of that now relates to some sort of Christian tradition or Islam or something like that. And so it's really defined there as an entity that's fighting against the goodness of God or Allah or whatever like that. But in demonology, that's not what you mean at all.
Another thing that just during our conversation here, because you mentioned during your studies that you have, you had some familiarity and experience that you studied demons of Eastern culture of Eastern Europe. Can you actually? There's some demons that are just worth mentioning for minimum entertainment purposes here that you can educate myself and our listeners about any historical demons of Eastern European culture?
Oh, sure. The one I always love to talk about is a creature that's referred to as the Rusalka. The Rusalka is, you could think of it, so I typically introduce it as it's almost like a female counterpart of the vampire. People are usually like, what do you mean female counterpart? Because interestingly, in original belief, it seems that the vampire was defined as something that could only be from a man, and women did not become vampires at the death. So by definition, the vampire can't exist until you die, first off. And it was only men originally, is what the belief seems to have been, based on the evidence that we have. But, so you have kind of like this female counterpart of this, called the Rusalka. That's what it is in Russian, at least. You have different words for the same thing, different languages from Eastern Europe, because they speak, Slavic languages are related, but they have different words for things. So, in Russian, you call it the Rusalka. And the Rusalka was typically depicted as a beautiful young girl who had, like, a perfect body, like, perfect breasts, perfect hips, like, absolutely 100% perfect girl, except for a couple things. So she had this long white hair that constantly dripped water, and sometimes instead of eyes, they had these kind of like big white spheres. So there was no color to their eyes and no pupils. It was just these sort of like white spheres. So other than that, they looked, like a really normal, beautiful girl, so to speak. And they were similar to Greek sirens in that they would sing and they could lure you in with their singing, but especially they could use their physical beauty to lure you in. So as you would expect, some of their primary victims would be young men, that are supposed to get married in the upcoming fall or whatever. So they lure them down to the river and then drown them or rip their head off or, kill them in some way. Sometimes they could tickle you to death, for example. So, again, you don't think, like, what kind of demon is that? It tickles you to death. But it's this. And so what's interesting about that thing is that it's similar to the vampire because it's not actually, so it's sometimes the word Rusalka is translated into English as mermaid, which is absolutely incorrect because it's not a mermaid. This is not like Ariel here. The Rusalka is, in essence, a form of restless dead. It's a young girl, in most cases, not all cases. In most cases, it's a young girl who died at a marriageable age, which means it was an age where she should be getting married. And she died before she got married and had any kids. And that was considered to be unclean, they would call it. Unclean in Eastern European tradition doesn't mean literally dirty. It means somehow outside of the ordinary, like not normal or negative. So in Russian, the word is nechista, means unclean. So that was considered to be unclean death. It means that she died before she became fully a woman by the way they defined it at that time. She never got married, so she was not officially a woman. And it was thought in certain parts of Eastern Europe that that girl's spirit then would be restless to come back from the grave. And since her fertility was never used, it was like this wasted fertility symbol, she would use that fertility to lure in young men and kill them with it, basically. Or she could sometimes even water your crops in the morning. You do little rituals for them. They could run around your crops in the morning. They were supposed to spread the dew in the grass in the morning and stuff like that in certain areas, believe that at least. And that's what she was. So it's a form of like undead, basically, is what it is. That's not a corpse. The vampire is a corpse in those cases. The Rusalka is more of like a ghost that looks human, but isn't. So it's a demon. That's what it is. So, like again, you hear demon, you think it means like horn thing. It doesn't. It's any sort of malicious entity. And a Rusalka in many cases could be malicious, but unlike the vampire, which is always malicious, the Rusalka could also be positive too. So it's a little different. So that one I always like talking about because it's pretty well known in Russia and other Eastern European countries. They have different words for the thing, as I said. It's a pretty well known one. So I like to discuss it because it's kind of like, as I said, it's kind of like a female counterpart to the vampire almost, and how it works and stuff.
Very interesting, and on my end, I had to hide my laugh when you said "tickled to death." I had to kind of pull away from the mic.
There's at least one folktale I read once where I think she tickled like husband or something to death. It wasn't her husband, of course. But yeah, they can they can tickle you to death.
So, Stan, the last question I have for you that hopefully you have something you can entertain us with here. But since you are, well, let me ask you this first to kind of build this up. What do you consider yourself a demonologist?
Yes.
Okay, so in your study of demons, and when I read your paper, obviously, there's a lot of scientific reason for a lot of the myths and demons that are created. You mentioned in the paper, even just things of disease and urbanization, that a lot of things, you mentioned the vampire, that you can trace it back over hundreds, if not a couple thousand years, and there's reasons and how these things build. But have you ever studied a demon, a particular demon or multiple demons where it didn't necessarily seem like there was an obvious social or sickness or disease, that it still had a bit of mystery to it that is worth it? Someone said, like if a lot of these demons point back to sicknesses and disease and stories and myth, there's got to be something out there that still has an element of mystery that might be worth looking into, that isn't something more than just story or myth. Does anything come to mind when I phrase it like that?
So basically what you're asking is, have I ever encountered any sort of demon that seemed to have no natural explanation?
Exactly.
The answer is no. No.
Definitively no. So every demon you studied has had some kind of natural background that you could point to.
And what I've actually found, because people who have contacted me about exorcisms and stuff, the vast majority of people, except for one I can think of, came from a Christian background. And when I would ask them questions about their life, to try to understand where they're coming from and their belief about, demon or demons that they think are, infesting their lives in some way, what I find in every case is they usually have some tragic. No, they always had some tragic past. They were abused as a child, or they were getting over alcoholism and drug addiction. They lost a husband, or their wife died, or their kids died in a car accident. They always had something negative that preceded any of this happening, right? So basically, what happens is that these ideas, that these things they believe in already, are then verified by things they begin to see. And ideas are powerful. When the human mind locks on an idea, and you begin to define your world based on that idea, it can be a dangerous thing. This is, for example, a reason why white supremacist groups still exist, because they find in what they believe, they find these beliefs, regardless of how skewed the majorities of Americans find these beliefs. The reason that they still believe these things is they find their ideas verified out in the world. They say, well, there's proof over there that the Jews are doing this and that. It's ridiculous to someone who's not a part of that, because you can see the reality of it. But they have defined themselves with this idea that's so much that it really colors entirely how they see the world. And when people get this demon idea in their head, as I found in every case I've dealt with people who have contacted me, they are typically taking all of their struggles and they're giving it almost like this manifested physical form or this supernatural form, and they're kind of like placing all of their frustration into this thing and blaming their feelings and their problems on that, right? Because it's easy to do that. It's easier to say, that's it there. Then I have to fix myself, right? And I got to get over this stuff that happened to me. People go through bad stuff sometimes, and sometimes their ideas can lead them to places like this. That's what I've always found. I've never encountered a demon that didn't have a natural explanation. That doesn't mean such a thing doesn't exist. I'm just saying from my experience, it's very unlikely such a thing to do. Now, okay, the problem there is that you're getting into aspects of faith. If you are a Christian, for example, and you believe, heaven or hell, purgatory, however you define it, and you believe demons exist, that's faith, though, right? And the idea about faith that people don't seem to get anymore is faith is belief without the proof, right? That's what it is. You say, I believe in this because I do. And I think Christ saved the world, whatever, and I believe. I don't need proof. That's what faith is. There's not like a scientific, well, let me write down all the evidence I have here. You're not supposed to do that. It's a mystery of God. You're supposed to shut up and worship and believe. That's the idea. And if you don't agree with that, sorry, but that's the essence of Christianity. That's what you're supposed to be doing. So if you believe in demons, it becomes difficult then, because I'm telling people it's ideas you got in your head, and they actually believe in it. So it's difficult to break people of that. And I've never encountered a person who I couldn't break, I guess. Although maybe there's one case that's potentially, I'm not sure exactly how they took it, because they were a little, I think I just didn't really get what I was doing, but I won't get into that. So yeah, I there's no demon I've encountered, in the occult studies or paranormal, whatever, that did not have some actual explanation. And that's what demons were for originally. Before we had the science to explain diseases, you find demons usually fulfilling that role in original mythology. That's usually what they were for. You can find this in the Middle East. You can find it in Native American beliefs, where these things typically explain disease. Find it in South America, pre-Columbian cultures. I mean, it's everywhere. And then when we get more science, and we don't need the demon anymore to explain, why I got a liver disease, then parts of it go away. So the one interesting thing, though, is really the only place for modern-day human beings, at least, in a developed society like America or other countries like that, where there's like sort of dying off older belief system, is that there's really only one area that still freaks us out because we still don't have a scientific explanation for it. And what that is death. So with death, people will still rely heavily on religion to deal with that, right? And what's interesting about death, too, is you can have an atheist who says, well, I don't believe there's anything. But they are also taking that belief on faith. It's amazing, actually. They don't actually know. Nobody actually knows what happens after death. You might die and discover that the Muslims are right and be like, oh, crap, I picked the wrong one. Or they might discover the Christians were right. Maybe it was specifically the Baptists who were right. I mean, we don't know. There's hundreds and hundreds of religions out there, and any one of those could be correct. And we don't know exactly if any of that is correct, or if there is nothing, or if we're reincarnated and maybe there's some science to that we haven't figured out yet. We don't know. And that's the area where there still is mystery, is what is death, and what's beyond in space maybe too. That's different. That still involves science. But for human beings, the big mystery we still haven't figured out is death. Right? What happens next? So people often rely on things that attach to that too, is using old mythology and things like that. That's really the primary way that we still use those types of beliefs in modern day, depending on the background you're coming from. But yeah.
Well, Stan, I honestly could not think of a better way to wrap this all up. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you had fun doing this with me. I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did.
Cool. Is this live?
It's not live.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not live. It's recording, and then I'll do the post production here shortly. So, but I appreciate it very much. Thank you for taking the time, and I will chat with you off air here in a second. Okay.
Okay, sounds great.